We're rolling into the second week of September here, and I'm feeling like it's definitely time where I want to talk about seeds, tree seed, and the work of gathering, storing, processing tree seed. I've made a lot of videos on this topic before, and so you can definitely check those out if you're interested. I don't want to cover exactly the same things again, but I do feel like, as the seasons progress, as I grow more trees, as I learn more, my techniques are changing a little bit. The little bits of nuance that I can share change a little bit. Also, I do feel like my editing style changes a little bit. Hopefully my camera work improves. I know that it's certainly changing. Hopefully it's improving. And so I just want to talk about what tree seed collection, processing, storage, handling looks like for me this time of year, early September. This is kind of almost the calm before the storm. In a way, the calm before the storm feels more like August. Into September, the storm is here, but it's not the busiest part of the year. You just saw me pick a walnut off a tree, which I normally don't pick walnuts off the tree, but I just felt compelled to grab this one. You can do that. It's best to wait till they fall to the ground. But I showed this walnut to exemplify that nuts are falling. I made a video recently about hazelnut. I've got a pawpaw video in the works, but I've been busy picking walnuts, picking the early oaks, picking, hazelnuts. Believe it or not, some of the first persimmons are becoming ripe. I've got some persimmon seeds sitting right over here that I was eating some fruit, spitting out the seeds, processing the seeds. So, it's starting. Here's a bag. I'm gearing up to do some seed processing. Here's some pawpaws that I picked the other day. They're kind of overripe and not suited for eating. I'm going to process them and get the seeds out of them. Just want to talk about what that looks like. The first thing you're going to have to do is collect the seed. And when you're out collecting and scouting, I've talked about this in videos before. My methodology is just to always be looking anywhere that I'm going, whether I'm on a walk, on a hike, driving to the grocery store, traveling to go meet somebody. I'm always looking and observing the trees around me to try to identify species, to look for any really big old trees, to look for trees that are loaded with fruit or flowers or have any sort of exceptional qualities that I might want, that might make me want to gather seed from them. That could just be as simple as, this is a species I've never seen or worked with before. It's the only example I've ever seen. That makes me want to get seed from it, It might not be that it's a specifically outstanding tree, but for example, I have only found a sassafras tree bearing fruit once. This was years ago, before I knew what I was doing. I let the seed dry out. None of them germinated. I've seen plenty of sassafras trees since, but I've never seen one with berries at the time I was there. So regardless of size, whether it was a big tree, old tree, little tree, young tree, if I find a sassafras with fruit, you better believe I'm going to be grabbing those fruit for seed. But so anyway, wherever I'm at, I'm looking for seed, I'm looking for trees, all times of year, but especially this time of year in the fall, which is the bulk, this is the busy season for most of the trees that I'm interested in. So I'm always looking. And that way, when it gets to this time of year, I already have a rough idea of where some trees are. And so I'll go out with the intention of going to certain trees that I know of, checking to see, are there fruit and nuts on the ground? Are they looking ripe? If yes, I'm going to try to collect some. If no, I'll set an intention to come back. While I'm out, I'm going to explore for other things in the area. I'm going to walk around a little bit. When it comes to which trees we're selecting seed from, there's a lot of flexibility. It's really up to you as the grower. You are a seed grower. You are collecting tree seed and growing it out, or giving it to someone to grow out, whatever. You are inputting a selection criteria, right? You're applying selective pressure to which seeds you choose to grow. So when you look at a tree and you decide for any reason, I'm going to collect from this tree, that's a selection criteria. Anytime you pick up a seed from a tree, or any plant for that matter, and you decide to propagate it, to grow it out, that's breeding. You are using selective pressure on that plant because you are deciding, I'm going to collect seed from this tree and not that tree. That's a selective pressure, for good or bad. I'm trying to paint it mostly in a positive light. It's plant breeding. It's not as intentional. Maybe intentional is not. It can be very intentional. But there's not as much method to it as, say, the way that universities do breeding projects, and they have a lot more workers and land and infrastructure and equipment, you know, they can do things at a larger scale and a longer time span than most of us individuals can. But that doesn't mean that what we're doing is not breeding. By selecting a certain tree and saying, I'm going to take those seeds and grow them, that's a selective pressure. You're choosing which genetics are moving forward. And you get to decide what's appropriate. I'm not telling you that it's right or wrong. You know, if you decide you only want to gather from old trees, that's right for you. If you only want to gather from young trees, that's right for you. So you get to make those decisions. That's the best thing about growing trees from seed. I mean, I love buying trees from other people. You know, I have lots of friends who grow trees. I trade trees with people. I buy trees from people. I love it. But the benefit of growing trees from seed on your own is you get to have full control over that genetic selection. So what, you know, so it's up to you. I don't want to make it seem like there's a right and wrong. What I do want to say is the quality of the seed itself is going to really impact your germination rate and success. And all I mean by that is that if the seed is not viable, you can't grow a tree. And so it is very much worth your time when you're out here looking for trees and looking for seed. You see a tree, it's got some fruit or nuts or seed, whatever on it. You think, oh, I want to collect a bunch. It's usually beneficial to stop yourself first and say, let me inspect the seed before I put a lot of time and effort gathering a bunch of stuff. You see a lot of seed on the ground or in the tree, whatever. Take some of that seed, whether it's inside of a fruit and you have to get the seed out, whether it's like this walnut, it's inside of a husk, you got to get the nut out of the husk, right? There's the nut in there. Crack a few of the seeds open. If it's a nut, crack it open with a hammer. If it's, you know, a fruit seed, a persimmon seed, an apple seed, cut it open with a knife. Acorns, you can cut open with a knife. You can smash them with a rock. You want to do several, get a good little sample size, smash open like 5, 10, you know, however many you think you need to get a good sample size of what is on the ground. And you might notice some differences. What you're looking for is seed that's not fully developed. If it has empty spots inside of the nut, inside of the seed casing, if it's just not fully filled out, you're looking for evidence of mold or insect damage inside of the seed. You want to see a fully filled out seed with very minimal, really no damage from insects or mold. That's going to be a viable seed. And especially early in the season, a lot of the first fruit, nut, seeds that fall off the trees are defected in some way. They might be completely duds. They might be partially damaged. You can often get some germination rates on those early lower quality seed, but it's typically going to be less than the later drop. And so it's just something to keep in mind. You know, I will occasionally collect seed and try to grow out seed that I think is not premium quality because it may be the only seed I have access to for that tree. Maybe I'm traveling very far from home and I don't get the timing right. I find a special tree. There's only subpar seed on the ground. I might still collect it and try to grow it. And I'll just know, I'll be prepared. It might not have the best germination rate. And maybe I'll sow thicker. I'll sow the seed closer together or something like that. But this is just, I think it's an important thing to think about if you're trying to collect seed is, oh, you know, sacrifice a few. I know it's hard sometimes, but cut a few open, sacrifice a few seed for the benefit of the rest of the population that you're hopefully going to grow. It really can set you up for more success growing the trees. You don't want to prepare a whole bunch of garden space, spend a bunch of hours gathering seed, plant them all out, wait all winter, spring comes, and almost none of them germinate. That's a bummer. It's a learning experience. I'm not trying to make anyone afraid of gathering seed, but I'm just, you know, it's kind of just that don't put all your eggs in one basket thing, you know. Inspect the seed and try to grow seed from many different sources, many different species. The more you diversify and the more you inspect the seed, the better off you'll be in the long run. Now, if you've seen my other videos, you know, on this topic, or if you have any level of experience with working with these native trees to the East Coast, the Midwest, and other parts of the world, most of these tree seed require some sort of stratification process. They need to not dry out typically. They need to go through a cold and slightly moist period of time to basically simulate winter in order for them to germinate. Many of them require some sort of processing, removing the fruit or the husk or something like that in order to get to the seed. And so what happens is, you know, this time of year, so you basically have, you know, the way I see it, there's 2 or 3 options, maybe 3, for what you can do with the seed as you're collecting it. This could be whenever you're collecting it, but right now it's September. That's the context. You can get the seed, process it, clean it, and stick it in the fridge. And in the fridge, you can keep it moist, you can keep it cold, you can stratify the seed that way. Again, stratification is that process of mimicking winter cold and moist for a certain amount of time. It varies how long from species to species, right? But think of where that tree evolved, where that tree is native, you know. If a black walnut drops to the ground in its native range, it's either buried in leaf litter in the fall, or it's, you know, as the leaves fall down, or it's buried by a squirrel, right, in the ground. That walnut's going to sit there all winter long, and then in the spring it'll germinate. Think of pawpaws and persimmons. The fruit's either going to fall and rot on the ground, same deal, get buried in leaves, or it's going to be eaten and pooped out by an animal. The seeds will be pooped out, and they'll be sitting there in a pile of manure and then leaves all throughout the winter. So we're trying to you know, replicate that to whatever extent is possible. You know, we're in a more controlled situation. We're trying to cultivate and grow these trees. I'm not really going to talk much about using the refrigerator, because I don't use the refrigerator very much to store seeds. The major issues in the fridge is that if you get the moisture level wrong, if it's too moist, you can get mold in the fridge. So the only thing I'll say on it is, you know, if you're going to store seeds in the fridge, keep them in a bag or clear container of some sort, and inspect them, you know, every few weeks to look for mold. If you see mold developing, if you catch it early, you can typically rub it off of the seed. It's just on the surface and it's not a big deal. If it goes for too long, it will eat the seed. So mold is the major thing in the fridge. You can store seed in the fridge just in a bag on its own, or you can put some sort of medium like sawdust, sand, something in there to hold some moisture. That does make it harder to see the seed and inspect for mold. It is slightly more of a mimicking nature, because in nature, right, they're not just going to be naked in plastic. They're going to be covered in some sort of medium. So, you know, you can make your own decisions on that. I don't have strong opinions on the matter right now. I've done both. Like I said, I mostly don't use the fridge. I mostly store seed outside. So in an ideal world, I would get the seed right now. And in my climate, I'm here in the Southeast. This also works in the Mid-Atlantic. It gets more complicated and maybe not as simple in the Northeast, where it gets colder. But I like to fall plant all of my seed if possible. Realistically, it's not always possible for me, just because I don't have bed space freed up right now. I have all my trees are still growing in their beds. I haven't pulled them out and removed them from the beds yet. But what's easiest for me is to just get the seed, prepare a bed, you know, have loose soil, compost, whatever you're going to plant into, have it prepared, scatter the seed, cover them with some sort of wood chip, leaf mulch, whatever, mulch of your choice, water them in and walk away. And that is the closest you can get to mimicking what's going to happen in nature. It's, in my opinion, the least labor intensive, because you have to prepare the bed to plant the trees no matter what. So that's not any additional labor. You have to plant the seed no matter what. If you store the seed, you're just going to do all of these steps in the spring. So you're doing it in the fall instead. You don't have to worry about storage space, creating a storage condition, you know, all that sort of stuff. You will have to consider protecting the seed from rodents. You know, all of our nut seed is very, very good food for rodents, and so they can smell it out. If you're not planting it in a protected area, they will go under the soil and dig up those seeds and eat most of them, depending on how many you plant and what the rodent pressure is like in your area. So that's something to consider. But like I said, I don't have that option very often, at least in the early fall in September. As we move later into fall and I start freeing up bed space, moving trees, I can start planting. And I start planting as soon as I have bed space available. I'll start pulling seeds out of storage, or I'll just collect them, you know, in October, November, and plant them wherever I have bed space. Right now, while I don't have bed space, though, I need another solution. And so what I do is buckets. I'll give you a brief example here. And, you know, this video is mostly just me talking about some of the theory and methodology. As I go through the season, I'm going to try to make videos on specific fruits. So I'll try to make a pawpaw video, a persimmon video, so forth and so on. And in each respective video, I'll try to show what I'm doing with the seed for each species individually to kind of give more nuance. But here's the basic gist. For almost all of the species that I work with, anything that is considered a wet seed, and I guess I can go over that in a minute. I've talked about that in previous videos. There's wet seed and dry seed. You know, wet seed is going to be anything that comes wet. It comes inside of a fruit. It's wet. It comes inside, you know, you may not think of nuts as a wet seed, but they are coming inside of a husk. They are slightly moist. They're not fully dried out. Most nuts don't like to dry out. They're sort of considered wet seed. Dry seed is stuff like redbud, locust. You know, they come in these dry pods. They're like beans. You know, as an annual perspective, corn, right? Grains are dry seeds. They want to be stored dry. If they're stored moist, they'll typically rot. So anyway, for any wet seed, this is what I do. It's very simple technology. It is a bucket. I have used buckets. This one's from Tractor Supply. I, you know, pull them out of the dumpster. I go to restaurants and ask if they have any used buckets, and I just get buckets wherever I can. I drill some holes in the side. I also drill some holes in the bottom there. A lot of holes in the bottom. You want good drainage. You'll notice the size of these holes is relatively small because I do not want mice to be able to get in there, right? So that's probably like, that hole is definitely smaller than 1/4 inch. I don't like to go any bigger than 1/4 inch. And then all I do is I mix up the seed with wood chips to hold them in a moist condition. You can see here's a pawpaw seed. There's still some moisture on the seed, even though it's just a few inches under the wood chips. And what I did, you know, and I'll show you guys this in the pawpaw video. Maybe I'll show this briefly. All I'm doing to get to this point, as far as seed cleaning goes, is I'm taking the raw pawpaw fruit, mashing it, mixing it with wood chips. If I had clean seeds, you know, if I was eating pawpaw, spinning out and saving the seeds, I would just mix the seeds in with the wood chips. But having the wood chips, you know, this could be leaves, this could be sawdust, this could probably be sand, compost, any sort of carbon, organic material that can soak up and hold on to moisture and nutrients. That's what you want to, you know, hold the seeds. We're trying to mimic the forest floor in a way, right? And you're just mixing up the seed. Like I said, pulp, fruit can be in there. If we're talking about nuts, you could take black walnuts with the husk on or off. You could bury these, you know, in your bucket with the husks on, and over winter, the husk will decompose the same way that the pawpaw, the flesh of the fruit, decomposes, and the seed is fine and it's totally able to handle that treatment. There's pros and cons to cleaning your seed versus not. You know, cleaning your seed is extra labor, right? So it's extra time, it's extra labor. If you do clean your seed, it's easier to know what you have. You can get a rough count. You can inspect the seed, make sure, like, especially with nuts, you know, you might want to crack a few open and make sure that they don't seem like duds. But I've got the same thing going on here. This one has hazelnut, and that is why this one has the hardware cloth and these big weights on it, because like I said, rodents will go after these seeds. Pawpaw, the rodents don't go after, so that can be open. You can see that right now we're just sitting on my front porch area. This is not long-term storage, but for now, there's no threat of cold. We have had very dry conditions for the past few weeks. These are not going to get rained on, but if they did, they have holes so they could drain. This type of storage is fine for right now. As we move into the colder months of the year, you do want to insulate these from really harsh freeze. They can freeze a little bit. You don't want to freeze super hard. So I will typically just pile up hay, mulch, leaves, whatever, up to like here, just to slightly insulate the buckets. You could dig them into the ground if you really want to, but I find just piling up mulch around them is easier, simpler. Like I said, any nuts, you really want to protect the tops with some sort of wire metal situation. You know, I've had squirrels steal a whole 5-gallon bucket full of prepared walnut seed in less than 48 hours, so they can go fast. But so yeah, I'm going to continue the work that I was mentioning with these pawpaws. These persimmons, like I said, I was eating them, spitting out the seeds, so I'll have to get a bucket ready to receive these with some wood chips. I'm going to take these pawpaws here, put them in a bucket, mash them up just like that, and mix some wood chips in. That's pretty much it.